Audience discretion is advised due to potentially distressing and sensitive material. If you're fascinated by true crime but want the real facts about serial killers, we're here to debunk some common stereotypes associated with this chilling category. We'll address questions like whether they are more intelligent than the average person, whether they are truly loners, and the reality of criminal profiling as depicted in shows like Mindhunter. Our insights are adapted from an episode of Misconceptions on YouTube and many articles on serial killer facts and misconceptions. So let's get to it. First myth, all serial killers are incredibly smart. The media often depicts serial killers as evil geniuses, skillfully eluding law enforcement for years without arousing suspicion. But how intelligent do you really need to be to commit murder? Do serial killers generally have higher IQs than the average person? IQ tests in serial murder cases show that these criminals are no smarter than the average general population. The average serial killer IQ is around 95, within the typical range of 90 to 110. The ability to conceal their crimes usually stems from an obsessive nature, which is not necessarily a sign of high intelligence. This myth of superior intelligence may lead some to believe that serial killers only get caught because they want to, but that's not accurate either. According to the FBI, quote, as serial killers continue to offend without being captured, they may feel invincible, believing they will never be identified. Over time, they may start taking shortcuts, increasing their risk of getting caught. It's not that serial killers want to get caught, they simply believe they can't be caught. First-time offenders lack experience and gain confidence and proficiency with each new offense, eventually making fewer mistakes. Although serial killers often plan their crimes more meticulously than other crimes, they still face a steep learning curve. They must navigate the complexities of selecting, targeting, approaching, controlling, and disposing of their victim, which can be especially challenging when multiple sites are involved. As serial killers continue to evade capture, they often become emboldened, believing they will never be identified. Over time, they may start taking shortcuts, as I previously mentioned, in their crimes, increasing their risk and chances of being caught. It's not that serial killers want to get caught, rather they develop a false sense of invincibility and believe they cannot be caught. Certain types of serial killers tend to be more intelligent than others. For instance, an analysis revealed that killers who used explosives had an average IQ of 140, indicating superior intelligence. In contrast, those who resorted to bludgeoning had an average IQ of 79, which is below the national average. Our second myth is all serial killers are loners. It's easy to think of serial killers as social outcasts, but many lead seemingly normal lives. The FBI reports that most serial killers are not reclusive misfits. They often have families, neighbors, and coworkers who are unaware of their violent tendencies. About 10% of serial killers operate in groups, showing that collaboration is not uncommon. Robert Yates murdered 17 prostitutes in the Spokane, Washington area during the 1990s. He was a married man with 5 children, lived in a middle-class neighborhood, and was a decorated helicopter pilot in the U.S. Army National Guard. During the murders, Yates frequently solicited prostitutes, and several of his victims were acquainted with one another. He buried one of his victims in his yard beneath his bedroom window. Yates was eventually arrested and pled guilty to 13 of the murders. Gary Ridgway, known as the Green River Killer, confessed to killing 48 women over 20 years in the Seattle, Washington area. He had been married 3 times and was still married at the time of his arrest. Ridgway worked as a truck painter for 32 years, regularly attended church, read the Bible, at home and at work, and discussed religion with his co-workers. Throughout the time he was killing, he also frequently picked up prostitutes and had sex with them. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, murdered 10 people in and around Kansas over a 30-year period. He sent 16 written communications to the news media taunting the police and the public. Rader was married with 2 children, served as a Boy Scout leader, honorably served in the U.S. Air Force, worked as a local government official, and was president of his church. Now, the killers we just talked about take us to our third myth. Serial killers are only motivated by sex. While many famous serial killers like Albert Fish, Ted Bundy, and Jeffrey Dahmer had a sexual component to their crimes, not all serial killings are sexually motivated. Some killers are driven by greed, such as H.H. Holmes, who profited from his murders. Others seek excitement or an outlet for anger, as seen in the D.C. sniper killings. In the Washington, D.C. area serial sniper case, John Allen Mohammed, a former U.S. Army Staff Sergeant, and Lee Boyd Malvo killed primarily out of anger and thrill-seeking. They terrorized the greater Washington, D.C. metro area for 3 weeks, shooting 13 victims and killing 10 of them. They communicated with the police through notes and attempted to extort money to cease their shootings. They are also suspected of involvement in other shootings across 7 other states. Dr. Michael Swango, a former U.S. Marine, ambulance worker, and physician, was a healthcare employee convicted of only 4 murders in New York and Ohio. However, he is suspected of poisoning and killing 35 to 50 people throughout the United States and Africa. Swango's motivation for the killings was intrinsic and never fully identified. Interestingly, he kept a scrapbook filled with newspaper and magazine clippings about natural disasters where many people were killed. Paul Reed murdered at least 7 people during the fast food restaurant robberies in Tennessee. After gaining control of his victims, he either stabbed or shot them. The primary motivation for the murders was to eliminate witnesses. Reed committed the robberies for financial gain, using some of the stolen money to purchase a car. This takes us to myth number 4. All serial killers have dozens of victims. When you think of a serial killer, you might imagine someone with a long Wikipedia page and a high victim count. However, those who meet these criteria are not the norm. According to the FBI, a criminal needs to kill at least 2 people in separate incidents with a cooling off period in between to be classified as a serial killer. This definition means there are more serial killers than people realize, but many are not prolific or distinctive enough to gain media attention or a notorious nickname. Myth number 5. All serial killers are mentally ill. The public often assumes that individuals who commit multiple murders are mentally ill. While this might be true in a general sense, it does not mean they are legally insane. Few murderers meet the legal criteria for insanity, which involves being unable to understand the gravity of their actions. Serial killers with mental disorders typically exhibit antisocial personality disorders like sociopathy or psychopathy, which the American Psychiatric Association does not classify as mental illnesses. These individuals can distinguish right from wrong, and many are adept at social behaviors, making their disorders hard to detect. Additionally, people with severe mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. Myth number 6. Serial killers can't stop killing. Popular media often portrays serial killing as an addiction, but some serial killers do cease their activities. For example, the BTK killer Dennis Rader murdered 10 victims between 1974 and 1991 and did not kill again before his capture in 2005. During interviews with law enforcement, Rader admitted to engaging in autoerotic activities as a substitute for his killings. Jeffrey Gordon killed his first victim in 1986 and his second in 1991. He did not commit any further murders before being captured in 2002. During the intervening years, Gordon engaged in cross-dressing and masturbatory activities as well as consensual sex with his wife. Myth number 7. Serial killers are exclusively white males. Contrary to popular belief, serial killers come from all racial backgrounds. There are white, African American, Hispanic, and Asian serial killers. The racial diversity among serial killers generally reflects that of the overall US population. Charles Zhang, originally from Hong Kong, China, killed numerous victims in Northern California alongside Robert Lake. Derek Todd Lee, an African American, murdered at least 6 women in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Coral Eugene Watts, also African American, killed 5 victims in Michigan, fled the state to avoid detection, and then murdered another 12 victims in Texas before being apprehended. Rafael Resendez Ramirez, a native of Mexico, murdered 9 people in Kentucky, Texas, and Illinois before turning himself in. Rory Conde, originally from Colombia, was responsible for 6 prostitute homicides in the Miami, Florida area. Though most serial killers are men, female serial killers do exist. A 2015 report found that approximately 16% of American serial killers are women, who often use methods like poisoning. Female serial killers are also more likely to work in healthcare and may kill in pairs or teams. Myth number 8. Criminal profiling is an effective way to identify serial killers. Television shows often depict criminal profiling as a reliable tool for identifying serial killers, but in reality, it is only marginally more effective than random guessing. Profiling rarely provides direct leads and has been criticized for being a waste of police resources. Myth number 9. A serial killer's MO never changes. A serial killer's MO can evolve over time. As FBI agent John Douglas explains, a criminal may adjust their methods to improve their effectiveness. It's important to distinguish between an MO, which is the method used to commit the crime, and a signature, which is a ritualistic behavior not necessary for the crime. Myth number 10. Serial killers pose a serious threat to the average person. Despite the fear they invoke, serial killers account for less than 1% of all murders in the US. In 2015, only 30 people were victims of serial killers, compared to the 24,576 homicides in 2020. Most murder victims are targeted by someone they know, not by random serial killers. Chicago-based forensic psychiatrist Dr. Morrison, who has studied serial killers extensively, highlights their similarities across different backgrounds. Regardless of country, ethnicity, race, socioeconomic status, education, or family background, serial killers share shocking similarities. A chromosome abnormality appears to be a common trigger for serial killers, with homicidal tendencies often emerging during puberty. While researchers have yet to pinpoint the exact gene, it is believed that a change associated with the male chromosome makeup plays a role. Most serial killers kill their first victim in their teenage years, though the desire to kill forms much earlier. A lack of attachment in early childhood development may contribute to their inability to empathize with victims. Serial killers do not form emotional bonds with their victims and often experiment on them without any sense of empathy. For example, Robert Berdella, the Kansas City butcher, conducted torturous experiments on his victims. Many serial killers have partners who are unaware of their crimes, and these women often exhibit extreme passivity and lack of assertiveness. Despite their heinous actions, serial killers often appear ordinary and can be very charming. This ordinariness allows them to gain the trust of their victims. However, research on serial killers is limited due to legal and governmental restrictions. Morrison is collaborating with a researcher at Cambridge University to study the lack of empathy in serial killers using transmagnetic stimulation to better understand their brain function. This research aims to uncover more about the brain's role in serial killer behavior. Myth number 11. Serial killers operate interstate. Most serial killers operate within well-defined geographic areas. They typically commit their murders within comfort zones often centered around an anchor point, such as their place of residence, employment, or a relative's home. Occasionally, serial killers may extend their activities beyond their comfort zones as their confidence grows with experience or in an effort to avoid detection. However, it is rare for serial killers to travel interstate to commit their crimes.